So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we make a return to Helm's Deep. The last time we saw Helm's Deep was, I think, the last time we're ever going to see the old version of the map, because this is the updated version of the one that WK has been working on, which of course still maintains the fortress itself. There's still a little bit more room actually in here than there was in the old version of Helm's Deep as well. You can see there's a few little bits and pieces as well, a few little details here and there, but there are more ways into the inner fortress, which I think is important, not only because it makes the battles more interesting to watch, which is obviously fairly all important from the perspective that we're watching it from, but also because it could be a little bit boring to play on as well, Helm's Deep, when you actually got down to the fortress at the back, because there really wasn't much you could do as the attackers or the defenders really, other than sort of settle in for the grind, and most of the interest happened on the outer gate and on the walls. But the most significant addition is of course the interior. The glittering caves themselves offer a little bit of a fallback option for the defenders back here, just in case they do want to go back over here. But there is also a way into the fortress interior itself. You can see that there is a fairly significant amount of space in here. I would really be quite interested to see how this is going to work actually, because a lot of the areas in here are very narrow, which Medieval 2 does fairly often struggle with, but the fact that the camera isn't going absolutely haywire does suggest that things could be fairly stable. It does also look as well like there is a route in down here as well, so very much a multi-pathed settlement now, Helm's Deep, with the interior included and the fortress itself somewhat expanded. But the first phase of the battle, it must be said, is going to work out in very much the same way, with the gatehouse and the large wall. So we'll go through the attacking armies first and foremost. This is of course intended to be a fairly lore-friendly battle, with Isengard and Dunland facing down against the Rohirrim and Lothlorien, starting off with Kuro Gurochan. It's been quite a while actually since I've done a replay with Kuro himself in it, playing as one of the Dunland armies. He's got some Dunman hunters, of course. Dunland made primarily of elements of the Isengard and Rudar armies kind of smashed together. They have a couple of completely unique units which are very powerful, but for the most part they are a entirely numbers focused faction. The Dunman Hunters really typify this because they're a very basic archer. They're in high numbers, but individually they are of very limited quality. Just back here we've got some Dunlending veterans as well, several units of them. As far as a basic line infantry unit goes, they're actually not too bad, and they'll do okay actually against entry-level Rohirrim units as well, as you would expect. Make life a little bit more difficult to sally out with defending cavalry as well, given that all Dunlanders have that anti-cavalry bonus. Just in behind we have some half-orcs, some half-orc Vanguard and Spearguard, armour-piercing shock infantry and basic heavy spearmen respectively. The half-orcs do represent a fairly decent core to the Dunland army as well. Individually they're reasonably sturdy actually for the types of units that they are, but they're certainly not match winners by any means. But a bit of armour-piercing and a bit of solidity on the front line is the sort of thing which Dunland will certainly appreciate. This is one of the completely unique units, the Spears of Orthanc, equipped with the finest gear, courtesy of Orthanc's forges. Fantastic crossbows, very good spears in melee as well, really a very good all-round unit. Helm's Deep can offer situations where attacking crossbows and skirmishers in general can get into really nasty positions if the defenders let them. I do actually think, in spite of the fact the settlement has been made a little bit bigger, it's actually going to be a little bit harder to do that on this occasion, but we shall see how these crossbows get on. I mean, if all else fails, they're still Dunland's best infantry unit by a country mile anyway, and several units of Dunman pikemen as well. I imagine pikes are the sort of thing which the attackers are not going to have any shortage of. Of course, Isengard are going to be able to bring higher quality ones than Dunland are, but even the most basic pikes can be very, very useful in the late game in a siege. Now then, moving on to the second army, we have WK himself, the map creator, playing as one of the Isengard armies. Uruk-hai infantry are going to be carrying the ladders forth. Uruk-hai infantry, of course, very good unit of line infantry for this sort of occasion, because they have the solidity to be able to withstand quite a lot of punishment, which is kind of unavoidable in a siege, especially in a 3v5. Like, as the attackers, you're going to need to take a fair amount of damage on the chin. The Uruk-hai infantry are very good at doing that, but also they're going to be effective at dealing damage in melee, especially against some of the more entry-level Rohirrim units. They'll really struggle one-to-one against units like the Uruk-hai infantry, but of course that's where the elves and some of the armour-piercing higher tiers from Rohan may come in. Of course, the Fire of Orthanc, the Black Powder Cart, which is kind of a must-have in this kind of effectively scenario, albeit this is just crafted based on a regular siege. Obviously going to be able to knock down a wall, very large blast radius as well, so defending infantry is going to have to be on the lookout for that. We've already mentioned the possible benefits of the crossbows. The Uruk-hai crossbows are a very good unit of crossbows as well, but they don't have the same presence in melee as the spears of Orthanc have, so that is worth bearing in mind as the battle goes along, but it's still a very real danger that the defenders are going to have to try and nullify. On the flip side, the Uruk-hai pikemen far superior to the Dunland pikemen. The armour will certainly help them get through the rigours of battle with a little bit more efficiency, and just in general, they are going to be a very dangerous foe that the defenders are going to need to whittle down over the course of the battle. We've seen in the past Isengard win on the strength of their pikes in the late game. The defenders will be hoping that isn't the case here. Looks like a single unit of Nazkai with some berserkers as well. A couple of units of the half-orcs that we've already seen. Like I said, Dunland do have a fair amount of crossover with the Isengard faction. And yeah, very good armour-piercing, high-end units as well. Now, back over here, what do we have? We have more of WK's army, actually, so a very large army indeed. These being the Dunlanders, basic Dunlanding clansmen, to offer a high amount of numbers, not necessarily the best at killing infantry though. A couple of units of veterans, and there's a unit way back over there as well, another unit of veterans, which will be scrambling their way forwards. Now then, the third army, we have Hunter or Hunted. He's got some trolls of the White Hand trolls. Again, timing going to be very key to how effective they're going to be, but the damage spike they offer, if used at the right time, can be the catalyst for pushing through some of the nastier defensive positions in the fortress's interior, of which there are many at this point, let's not forget, that the defenders can choose from, so it's going to be an interesting dilemma, but a good dilemma for Isengard to choose when to use their trolls. Uruk-hai infantry, half-orc Bane Guard as we move through the half-orc ranks again, Spear Guard, and the Dunlanders out in front. There's a few more units just in behind these areas as well. Nazkai, crossbows, the Lurtz hunting pack, body-piercing projectiles. Again, it's going to be difficult to use them, but it's certainly the sort of thing which the defenders need to be on the lookout for, because if the attackers are able to use body-piercing projectiles in a fortress like this, it's going to be devastating. The third, and I think final Isengard army actually is under the command of Bogdan 20k. He's got some Uruk-hai berserkers, a couple of units of them. Of course, some Uruk-hai pikes, the ram, already going to be closing in on the gates, manned by Bane Guard, interestingly enough, but they've got decent enough armour to withstand some arrow fire, but still the sort of thing which the defenders are likely to try and shoot down. More Uruk-hai crossbowmen, we have some Nazkai, the first army we've seen to bring the very defensively savvy guards of Orthanc. They're very similar in terms of their dress, of course, to the spears of Orthanc from Dunland, albeit they, rather ironically, are a spearman unit rather than a crossbow first, but very, very solid nonetheless. And also some Uruk-hai infantry back down over there, and the final attacking army is actually a fourth Isengard army. I thought there was another Dunland force, but I was wrong. Played by Lawmaster Eothad. Uruk-hai archers are very basic, but again, just token skirmish forces. Well enough on this map. I mean, Isengard are always going to struggle, especially when Lothlorien are concerned, but again, we'll see how well he can utilise them. They're just really here to be an annoyance more than anything else. More Uruk-hai berserkers, so plenty of nasty armour piercing, not necessarily the most useful thing against Rohan and Lothlorien. We shall have to wait and see how well they do. Uruk-hai infantry, more Uruk-hai infantry, Uruk-hai raiders, a more numerous but less effective unit of light infantry. Several of them, but a few more numbers won't hurt. Uruk-hai infantry, more trolls, more pikes, more crossbows, more Nazkai, and some more Bane Guard over there in the distance. So, in the interior of the settlement itself, or castle I guess is a more apt description, we have Lango playing as one of the Lothlorien army, so some Loran-armed axemen ready to chop through Uruk-hai and wild men up on the walls. They'll be very good against the lighter Isengard units and most of what Dunland have brought. Against the heavier Isengard units in numbers, this is where Lothlorien could come unstuck a little bit, but even then, individually, Loran-armed axemen are still going to be superior to Uruk-hai infantry. It's not going to be a 1 versus 1 in a situation like this. Loran-armed swordmasters, of course, are going to be very good as well. Kind of similar, actually, in the kind of units they're good against. They're just more focused around their ability to deal damage rather than the defensive aspects that the shielded infantry in front of them get. Woodland protectors, very good for showering down a bit of armour-piercing damage upon the enemy, which is always going to be handy against a faction like Isengard, as of course are going to be the Loran-armed warriors, because they trade in a little bit of that base damage of the swordmasters in front of them for armour-piercing damage from those two-handed axes. Archers, of course, very good in position here with the Loran-armed archers from Kindred of Celeborn with their split-shot projectiles and their armour upgrade as well, so obviously Lorien are bringing the quality which they kind of need to in this kind of situation against the numbers they're facing off against. We also have Eclipse 2500 here, who's playing as one of the Rohirrim armies. Westmark infantry are actually fairly similar in terms of the tier they are to the Uruk-hai infantry. I think when it comes to the strengths you want from a line infantry unit, the Uruk-hai infantry ultimately are slightly more what you're looking for. But still, it's much of a muchness, really. You know what kind of unit to compare them to. They're kind of similar to the Haradrim Serpent Guard in many ways. They trade in a little bit of their survivability generally for being fairly effective in melee when it comes to damage and defense. But yeah, they're here in good numbers. More protectors, more warriors. Watchers of the Golden Wood are here. Not only the best aggressive unit of Lothlorien infantry, but also a fantastic archer with their Silverthorn arrows. So obviously they were going to be brought regardless. More Loren-armed archers. Looks like the entirety of the Lorien army is out here, really. There's also a Rohirrim catapult back here. The Keren Amroth Rangers, which could be utterly devastating, of course, the only option for Rangers on the defence, because Rohan do not have such a unit. Some Riders of the Golden Wood and some Sons of Eorl. We shall have to wait and see how this cavalry is utilised. I mean, at least the Riders of the Golden Wood can be used as archers if all else fails, and good ones at that. Mounted variants of the Watchers we've already seen, but the Sons of Eorl need to be utilised as cavalry. We shall see if they charge forth as effectively as they did in the movie. And some Galatharan Blade Masters back here as we make our way into the bowels of the settlement. Helmingas are pretty much the best standard archer that Rohan can field. Shield Maidens are going to be an important unit though, especially in the confines of the keep up here. Very good damage they can deal. Eastmark Spearmen of course do have a throwing projectile as well, but they're far more basic, but it does allow Rohan to build a bigger army, more Helmingas. Basic Riddermark Axemen for the armour piercing is going to be useful against the density of Isengard units that they perceive. Karas Galadon's Guardians are the best defensive unit of Lorien infantry. Multiple HP pikes, they have that distinction all to themselves at this point in the game. Westmark Spearmen, a couple of units of them to help back them up, and some armour piercing from the Riddermarks. Shield Maidens already in place with more Helmingas to back them up. Helmingas Medicel Guard, obviously a high tier unit of javelins, one of the higher tier units of javelins that the game has to offer generally. Not as destructive maybe as the Demons of the Desert, but a little bit more well-rounded with their abilities in melee. Westmark Marshals as well as more Shield Maids. Obviously the Westmark Marshals a higher tier unit of shock infantry, some more Westmark infantry. As we move back into the interior of the settlement we can see the heavy shields of the Helm's Hammers, more Shield Maidens, some supplies in here, yet another unit of Medicel Guard, and plenty of units in here, spears, more Westmark Marshals, more Shield Maidens, lots of Westmark Marshals in fact, so you can see the benefits of bringing a fair few Eastmarks as well. It means you're going to be able to load up on quality in other areas. But that is going to be it for the compositions. I can't imagine we're going to have to make too much of a cut before the attackers start moving forward. With the Black Powder Cart is maybe the opener, we shall have to wait and see, but I'll rejoin when the Battle of Helm's Deep is firmly underway.
The enemy have lagged. Curses! The enemy are battering down our gates!
So yes, we don't seem to have to wait too long before the game is actually getting underway here, as now the gates are being battered down, and based on the elven war cries that are being sent out, yes indeed the Loren-armed archers are just beginning to fire, with a few corpses being strewn around on the floor. Fire of Orthanc also ready to blow a massive hole in the wall, with the elves already positioning themselves just so they don't get blown up by it. More half-orcs are going to be the first ones onto the walls as well, although they are going to be moving right into the clutches of these Loren-armed axemen. Going to be a relatively easy fight that for the elves. Half-orcs Beerguard have got fairly decent armour values, but it's still going to be no match for that. You can see there the massive blast radius. Most of those units will get back up. In fact, all of them this far back will get back up. So there you have it, the Fire of Orthanc already being deployed. I think actually the delay on that seems to be fairly random, because that was fairly quick. Sometimes you see it sat there for ages and ages before it actually detonates, but not this time. Looks like some Dunland clansmen are going to be the first ones in through the gap, but of course the Lothlorien forces are ready to attack them with immediate effect. All these half-orc spearguards standing up on the walls, but they will be very quickly dealt with by any of the Loren-armed axemen should they hop down off the battlements. Still the Loren-armed archers continue to fire away, and of course they have the perfect shot through the wall now, albeit it's on a unit which is not exactly the highest in terms of quality. It's interesting to see the Loren-armed warriors be deployed as well. They would be better against armoured targets rather than the Dunlanders, but the Dunlanders are also taking substantial damage from archers anyway. Not that the Loren-armed warriors won't have the desired effect after all. Meanwhile over here the Rohirrim of course are taking the lead when it comes to the defence of the central keep and the gatehouse, as is expected. You can see the Westmark spearmen are here in such numbers that even the armour piercing of the Vanguard isn't really enough to overcome the difference in numbers here. Another unit of Vanguard moving forward though. I mean, the Vanguard should be fairly decent against the Westmark spearmen. The Westmark spearmen can't do tons and tons of damage quickly in return, and they themselves are among some of the more heavily armoured of the mainline Rohirrim units. But there you have it, and there is also the Westmark Marshals just in behind as well. So the Vanguard are still going to be struggling to make any sort of impact here until the Westmark spearmen start to lose a little bit more of their manpower. Meanwhile, further down here, Uruk-hai infantry, so all the ladders now being deployed. This is a good thing for the attackers, trying to swamp over with superior numbers. Also, the Uruk-hai infantry themselves will also be slightly better at withstanding the punishment from the Lorien axemen, albeit they should still lose this, albeit by a more narrow margin than the half-orcs we've already seen try to tangle with the Lothlorien infantry. Let's not forget as well that coming down off a wall, attacking into a defensive position, means that you're always going to be somewhat surrounded until you can clear a position, so the initial engagement is going to be fairly rough for Isengard, regardless of what unit they send forwards. There they are. More Swordmaster here. Still we can see some Uruk-hai infantry. There's a few remaining half-orcs from the initial push onto the walls, but so far Lothlorien are going to be fairly comfortable. The heavy axemen down here guarding the route through that the black powder can't clear. The Uruk-hai infantry are on the front line, of course. That, like I mentioned, that Uruk-hai plate armour is going to be dealt with fairly readily by the two-handed axes that they are facing now. Dunland clansmen moving forward also. Forward come the Uruk-hai pikemen. Uruk-hai pikemen going to try and anchor in position, but I don't think they're necessarily going to be able to get themselves in formation here to have the desired effect, and very quickly they're going to find themselves taking a lot of ranged fire, with woodland protectors also there as well, offering a bit of armour piercing. The Dunlanders that are fighting alongside them looking like they're going to rout with flaming arrows. That is only going to exacerbate the problem as the Helmingars try to assist their elven allies. As the Uruk-hai infantry already taking a lot of damage, of course. Plenty of elves up on this wall, including those swordmasters. Very high base damage on those elven swordsmen. The Uruk-hai infantry, as good as an infantry unit as they are, they do find themselves outgunned in this situation. And the situation they were climbing into is always going to be pretty dicey. Lorien archers are here, Rise of the Golden Wood, and maybe thinking about what they can accomplish as well. Westmark infantry moving forwards. Rohan there has a fair amount of damage done to the Lorien warriors on this side, but it just gives the archers a clearer shot. You can see, however, there is a little bit of support coming in from behind from Isengard as well. Uruk-hai crossbowmen trying to get some good shots, and this is a problem, of course, for the defenders. They can't afford to allow the Isengard crossbows to get too much in the way of these shots, but up on the walls over there, the Helmingars targeting them down, trying to limit a little bit of that DPS. Snaga skirmishers also throwing their javelins in support. Uruk-hai berserkers now climbing up on the wall represent a bigger threat to the Lothlorien infantry. I mean, the problem the berserkers do have is they are going to take damage quickly, and as soon as their hit points are gone, they will melt before elven units. But while those hit points are still up, they will be doing an awful lot of damage with those hooked two-handed swords of theirs. Vanguard moving up onto the walls as well, so more armour piercing, albeit of a lower tier nature than the berserkers, and they're going to struggle to make much of an impression given the amount of elves that are still on the walls here. You can see the routing of the half-orc spear guard. Routing back towards their Uruk-hai commander is probably not a good idea. Probably better off taking their chances against the elves, to be honest. Kindred of Celeborn firing away as well with their split shots. Some of the secondary projectiles flying over the walls, they might hit something else. But yeah, more half-orcs trying to clear a position here on the walls as well, more Vanguard as well, so I mean the armour piercing won't be completely wasted against Lothlorien, but Lothlorien have got the melee defense to back it up against these kinds of units. So that is a problem. Plenty of arrows still flying. Still the Helmingars firing away, giving the elves a little bit of support from up on these walls. They may not have the same damage as the elven archers, but they're in a very good position nonetheless. This Isengard assault has completely collapsed for the time being, and the Westmark spearmen are still in very good health as well, so in their shield wall formation having the desired effect there. You can see that another force is now being pushed up. I mean, interesting to see the ram. I mean, there is an interior gate now that the ram could be used for, but they don't want to go in first while the Rohirrim are still there in a very solid defensive formation. They're going to need to clear them out of the way first, and there's still plenty of attacking units left that can accomplish this. They do seem to be going a little bit more heavily in for the lower fortress first, though, which makes sense. Fort Isengard, and while down here you can see some Dunlanding veterans that Kuro has sent forward, facing off now primarily actually against Rohan defenders, so you can see that the elves have taken losses down here a little bit more noticeably. But Rohan are here to plug the gap, and that'll be just fine for the time being, and still with projectiles flying, the attackers are going to be taking an awful lot of attrition. More Dunlanding veterans coming in. Not sure how effective those, well, how efficient I should say those javelins will be. They'll be perfectly effective against Dunlanding veterans, but they'd rather they hit the Uruk-hai, I think. Snaga skirmishers taking a pretty hefty amount of damage there from the defensive artillery, the Rohirrim catapult. Snaga skirmishers, those javelins probably a major cause, along with the crossbow bolts, of why the elves are starting to lose a bit of their manpower down here in this defence. Those Isengard are running as well, so they're going to need to restart their offensive there too. Looks like those berserkers have already completely melted, so it's a sign of how effective the swordmasters can be at peeling away those hit points. But where one unit falls, another one is always ready to replace it, albeit the Uruk-hai raiders won't give the elves too much concern. It's just more meat for the grinder. Lornan swordmasters will be very, very effective against more basic units of orcish infantry such as this. As they continue to fight, more raiders also pushing up this land. No, actually this is raiders. I thought it was Snaga skirmishers for a second then, but more basic light infantry being committed now after the initial maybe slightly heavier assaults, when you can see that the elven units are starting to show a little bit more wear and tear, so eventually this is going to yield the results that Isengard and Dunland want to see. It's just a case of whether or not they take too much damage in the process as the elven infantry continues to fight the good fight. Down here you can see it's mostly Dunlanders at this point, although another unit, probably that looks like a returning unit, of Uruk-hai pikemen have been recommitted as the Kindred of Celeborn firing in. They still have the blood spray effect, which made the Rangers notorious for crashing games way back when, but haven't had that problem with the Kindred of Celeborn yet, touch wood. Well, Isengard have restarted their assault over here. They've left the ram just outside, as they should. Uruk-hai raiders moving in first with the Admiral Isengard, but again, 2 units of Westmark spearmen, some Helmingars that are out of ammunition as well. Of course, they can double as decent medium line infantry as well. And so the Rohirrim still reasonably comfortable here. As Isengard and Dunland start to make more inroads into the lower fortress, I do wonder if Isengard will up the ante on Rohan's defence of the main keep a little bit more so, but for the time being I think Rohan will be very happy with how things have gone. I mean, let's not forget there are 2 Rohan armies to just the one elven force under Lango's command, but so far the elves have done pretty well, doing the heavy lifting down here, but it is a sign of course that the elves will have much less of a presence in the late game as Rohan move forward. Some Dunman hunters that have been trying to offer a little bit of support, but taking hits from the Kindred of Celeborn, getting involved in melee with either Rohirric or Lorien units is not going to end too well for them, but it's more men that can be sent into the fight. Uruk-hai crossbows are up on the walls now, which I'm a little bit surprised actually that Lorien have allowed Isengard to take up a position like this with their skirmishers. This is exactly what you need to be avoiding on Helm's Deep. Very often we see Isengard attacking Helm's Deep and their crossbowmen can be such a dangerous thing. And those Karen Amroth Rangers have taken a lot of damage from something as well, so maybe they need to be retreated and saved for later, where the attackers have got less of an opportunity to use their resources on them now. As you can see, Uruk-hai archers are in there. What's going on there? Catapult is still there. There's still elven defenders on that side of the wall here, but you can certainly sense the momentum starting to shift in favour of the attackers down here now. Are they actually scoring hits there? That's a surprising choice of target, I must say. Looks like Isengard are trying to up the ante at least a little bit with more half-orcs coming onto the front line, but still, the amount of Rohirrim units that are here, especially those spearmen and shield wall, are going to make it very difficult for you to just bulldoze through this front line. And they're also solid enough in terms of their own defensive values that you can't kill them quickly either, even with units like Uruk-hai infantry. Riddermark archers up on the wall, obviously very basic as far as archers go, very limited damage, but everything is going to help. You need to try and blunt the manpower of all of the attacking forces. You can see here Dunland clansmen now trying to contest the walls. The tide very much coming in by the looks of things, isn't it? What have we got here? Sons of Eorl. All of the Kindred of Celeborn are there. Oof, that frame rate there. Good opportunity to use the knights actually, routing off the Dunman hunters. Rohirrim infantry fighting alongside the elves, still doing reasonably well. There's trolls up on the walls now as well, interestingly enough, with the shield maidens also trying to do damage as well. Combination of archers and shield maidens using their ammunition. I don't know, I've never been sure about using archers on trolls. They're big targets, so a lot of your arrows will hit, but arrows are so important for trying to kill off quantities of units. Very, I don't know, armor-piercing archers perhaps, but any other kind, I feel like they're better served firing into other things. Half-orc spearguard, I mean this is the problem now with cavalry. With half-orc spearguard and Uruk-hai pikemen in there, you can see the Kindred of Celeborn having a field day though. Lots of damage being done. Shield maidens also throwing their payload in there. So trying to give Isengard a little bit more room, and in so doing they are capable then of using their skirmishers to even greater effectiveness. You can see all sorts of hits coming in from the walls. The Kindred of Celeborn, the Riders of the Golden Wood. Obviously we already mentioned the Shield Maidens. Plenty of damage. You can see here some Eastmark Spearmen. Looks like they have run out of their very basic javelin, so they will now be moving in just to add more manpower to the front line, make it even more difficult to push through. But of course in melee they are very, very limited in their effectiveness. Shield Maidens of Rohan going to be throwing their projectiles in, and again it looks like another attacking force is going to be completely routed off. It's a bit of a problem for the attackers. They are gaining ground on the lower fortress, but things have not gone very well for them here in this gatehouse. Rohan have had a lot of success against them thus far. And I've always said it's kind of a bad sign when your attacks start to fall apart like that, but you can see here they are swarming now in the lower fortress. Going to have to retreat back into the caves, which is the thing, it's harder to cut them off now, the defenders, because they can just retreat into the caves and form up a secondary defensive position, which is exactly what they're trying to do. Obviously there's no way to retreat from there, but it also gives the attackers a little bit of a conundrum because they need to clear out those caves, but it means they also can't really fully commit to trying to take the main keep either. But progress is progress, and they have managed to push the defenders off the walls. Uruk-hai archers just going to be launching their arrows long and high up towards the keep. The Dunlanders and the Orcs are there, half-orc spearguard ready to move forwards, but Rohan obviously very ready to withstand another assault. There's still plenty of reinforcements further out from all the attacking armies though, so I'd imagine a slight slowdown in this assault down here is going to happen, a little bit of consolidation and then reinforcements brought forward perhaps. Don't fancy the chances of these Dunlanding veterans against these Westmark spears in an isolated fight, that's for sure. There's 4 trolls remain, but only one of them is actually in melee at this point. No, I'm blind. Excuse Excuse me. Apologies for that, I'll cut that if I remember to, but hay fever is here, it seems. Rohan archers out of ammunition, using their two-handed swords, should be pretty good for helping to cut down these trolls, and indeed there goes one. Dunlanders are going to be reinforced, however, with yet another unit of Uruk-hai infantry. Victory is almost a certainty. Lornan swordmasters are in here as well, but they've taken a little bit of attrition from their exertions on the outer walls. Lothlorien blade masters ready to be committed should they be required. Lornan archers are going to be firing in, presumably to the flank of this little blob, and indeed they are. Elsewhere, not much. Another little force coming up here, but Lornan warriors will easily be able to deal with Dunlanding clansmen like this. Now then, let's see. Isengard are moving forward here, putting pressure on the central keep, but Westmark infantry against Uruk-hai infantry, kind of similar, like I said, in terms of quality. As a line infantry unit, I do prefer the Uruk-hai, but superior positioning and superior numbers after the Uruk-hai having to see combat already means the Westmarks should be just fine. Then the original only route up to the central keep from this way, being blocked by Westmark marshals, so that armour piercing will make very quick work of the half-orcs that are trying to push forwards here. Meanwhile, flaming arrows being used on the Uruk-hai infantry, it is actually enough to break them, so a combined force of 2 units of archers there, ultimately enough to rout the Uruk-hai infantry. That's a fair amount of them as well. They should return, but that was good use of flaming shot there. There is of course the Riddermark archers here. I don't know if they still have ammunition, considering they've got their melee weapons out. You'd assume not. They're obviously very poor in melee as well. Another Isengard force is massing itself up for another go through the main gate, which they should do, because now that attacks are happening elsewhere, to take full advantage of that they need to be pressurising all the fronts that they are able to. This is more of a token force trying to clear out the caves by the looks of things, and it doesn't... I'm not sure that's going to go too well. They're going to need reinforcements here. If their idea is containment, then fair enough, but it's a dangerous situation here. I would have been more tempted to send token forces to the keep first and try and completely clear the caves, but that's just me. Sons of Eol leaving the area. Dunlanding veterans moonwalking in place. More half-orcs. Uruk-hai pikemen, a very depleted unit. Uruk-hai crossbowmen are here as well. Still, their bolts will still be effective. Lothlorien blade masters are here. So far, the bread and butter of this assault seems to have been the half-orcs. Very functional unit. Bandits from Dunland. Far too fragile in the face of professional Rohirrim soldiers and the grace of the elves. The half-orc spearguard are pushing forward, but pushing forward directly into a unit like Lothlorien blade masters isn't going to end too well. Especially not when they still have the Sons of Eol running around. I'm actually surprised that wasn't enough to rout them with instant effect. They turn around again. No, I thought they were going to charge in again, but it appears I was mistaken. Another hailstorm of throwing axes, connecting nicely. Going after the Uruk-hai pikemen as they should. Almost perfect target for a unit like the shield mains, but it looks like they literally just ran out of ammunition, so they will have to do the rest of their fighting in melee. Which they're okay at, but not brilliant. Decent defensive values. Sons of Eol coming in again. Surely this is now enough to rout this unit of half-orcs. Doesn't look like it, actually. More resilient in that respect than I gave them credit for. The Uruk-hai pikemen are running away, however. Those Kindred of Caliborn, no joke when they start targeting something down. More and more numbers being committed to this situation now, though. Again, the pressure is slowly being turned up. Snaga skirmishers in place, going to try and maybe whittle down the Lothlorien and Rohan units that are taking shelter in these caves. This is a large force from Isengard now, which is starting to pressurise this front line. When the pikes get to the front line, they'll be in a little bit more trouble, Rohan, but until then, the Westmark marshals will be exactly the sort of thing that you want to be dealing with these Isengard units. Riddermark archers blocking that way up. I mean, there's only so much they're going to be able to do if Isengard decide to pressure that area, but watch the Golden Wood are there. This assault is still ongoing, but this is a little bit more token, like I said. Half-Orc Baneguard, armor piercing, trying to have an impact on the Westmark infantry. And there are enough of them to the point where they could slowly start to overwhelm the Rohirrim defenders. Still not I mean, they're not able to get through the outer gatehouse here because of the presence of this very depleted unit of Helmengast. More of an annoyance for Isengard than anything, because they're going to end up killing off these very few Rohirrim soldiers anyway. A little bit further back, Westmark spearmen. Ready and waiting. So the spear position is still there, and I guess the Helmengast being thrown under the bus because they have Eastmark spearmen that can fill the same role now, but I'm not sure what throwing those Helmengast under the bus has actually gained them other than time, maybe, which may prove to be important. These banners are probably not textured correctly, but still, Black Waltz moving forward. Dangerous unit, of course, Berserker class, not as good as the Uruk-hai, but they will still have a scary effect on the soldiers that they attack. While Uruk-hai infantry getting partially surrounded now, actually, by the Westmark. Galatharan Blade Masters pushing forward, they've taken a fair amount of damage. I think attacking into these Uruk-hai might prove to be a little bit of an error, given the damage that they are already taking as a result. Sons of Eorl are still alive, but not many of them. If they can kill off those Uruk-hai crossbows, that would be something, but slowly but surely these caves are going to be put under the cosh. Shield Maidens of Rohan. And this is a good opportunity actually for them to fire into all of those Uruk-hai pikemen. They need to use their ammunition quickly though. Eclipse has done well to save it, but now is the time he needs to utilise it, and quick. Kill off as many of these Uruk-hai as they can, because I think the defenders in the caves are doomed kind of regardless of what happens. I mean, I suppose, to be fair, they've got a lot of elite units. It depends really on how the attackers want to handle business. This unit of Uruk-hai crossmen exposed to a bit of a counter-assault there from the Lothlorien archers. Further back, Dunland clansmen, some Uruk-hai pikemen as well. The Shield Maidens, unfortunately, with no infantry cover, having the infantry cover they would have had after all got sent forwards. They're now having to get into melee as well. Uruk-hai infantry actually shaken as a result of that. Very interesting, but yeah, stabilise the front line over here for the moment. Bandits are routing off as well. Still Woodland Protectors, so it looks like actually a full counter-attack is being ordered. Dunlanding veterans, clansmen I should say. Plenty of strong elven units, including the Kindred of Caliborn, of course, armour upgraded as well. I mean, the presence of these Uruk-hai pikes is going to be a problem, I think. It gives the attackers that really nice anchor that they can use to make life fairly difficult for the defenders when they're backed into the corner like this. Spears of Orthanc. Middlemark Axemen are there, trying to reinforce. Things are looking a little bit dicier over here as well, as more and more of these units are sent forward, including Uruk-hai Berserkers going AP to AP with the Westmark Marshals, but the extra hit points here is going to give the advantage to the Isengard units, and of course the Isengard force also has backup from those Dunland pikemen, albeit they're getting hit by arrows as well. So now we're starting to see the attackers really turn up the heat a little bit. Another genuine assault coming through the main gatehouse now as well, including pikes. So far the spears continue to hold and the javelins continue to do their thing as well. But this is where the defenders are going to need to start to make some decisions. The Medicel Guard actually doing the damage there as well. What are they going to do? Those Uruk-hai crossmen actually exposed to a counter-attack from the Watchers of the Goldenwood. That would be a brilliant catch if they can kill off a fully healthy unit of crossbows. But the Nazkai are down there as well, so I actually wouldn't recommend it. Nazkai can definitely contest a fight. Riddermark Axeman moving forward. Starting to have a bit of a terrain disadvantage now with the defenders, and those Dunland pikemen are really going to start to earn their pay as well. Riddermark Axeman will not be too efficient against a unit such as that. A little further down, Uruk-hai crossbowman trying to support their attack here as the defenders continue to mount their counter-attack, and maybe the emphasis they're putting on the central keep is what has convinced the defenders that this is the course of action they should be taking. Still those Riders of the Goldenwood with their Silverthorn arrows. Another unit now of Trolls of the White Hand moving forward, and the kind of units that are left here mounting this defence. Woodland Protector's not going to be brilliant at dealing damage to Trolls. There's not too many of the heavier Elven units left over here. There's not too much of the Rohirrim left either, to be honest, so very much getting into final stand territory now. Javelin support also coming in from the Snaga skirmishers, so it's all going the attacker's way in the fight for the caves now. The Riders of the Goldenwood are also trapped in here, so I don't know what they're going to be able to do. I mean, over here, to be fair, the defenders will do just fine because there's less of the attackers, and also they have that unit of real quality in the Kindred of Celeborn to make life more difficult, but Isengard will be hoping that their pikes can simply hold them at arm's length for as long as possible. Uruk-hai crossbowmen filtering off. Spears of Orthanc actually getting ready in a position where if the defenders do manage to break out, they will get introduced to the business end of those Dunlanding crossbows pretty quickly. Shield Maidens of Rohan. Things are getting a little bit messier now, which is not really what the defenders want, given the attackers, in spite of the losses they have taken, will still have the manpower advantage. Westmark Marshals defeat a distinct possibility. Trying to counter-attack out from here, I'm not sure about that. The armor piercing will be good against the Uruk-hai infantry, but you're in a bit of a dicey situation, especially seeing as they are trying to clear a spot on this outer ring here, which I would assume they're then going to post some crossbows in here, and that makes this part of the fortress extremely difficult to try and hold on to. These marked spears trying to use their javelins and pikes up on the walls, which if pikes can get set on walls, they're very good, but before they can do that, they are very vulnerable. Especially lower tier pikes that are very fragile, like these Dunman. More arrows. Ah, there we go, look. That happened last time we saw WK's update, the units that were walking in mid-air temporarily. I think that's because they're like climbing the towers, and for some reason they spawn out over here temporarily, which is a little bit strange, but it is what it is. Helmingars have got a pretty perfect shot though, to be fair, into those units, so the attackers will continue to have to bleed for every inch of ground they take. This position down here, Guards of Orthanc now. Looks like the defensive position around the main gate is finally being brought to its knees as well. Yeah, Nazkai, Guards of Orthanc, very high quality Isengard units moving forward to try and put this beyond all doubt. And yeah, I think you can see that they are starting to pull back just a little bit as the gates close. Two gates that Isengard may need to batter down. Riddermark Axemen are routing. Eastmark Spearmen are still in place. Are they going to throw their javelins at? Yes, they should be throwing them into this blob. As much damage as they can possibly do. Trollshore Axe Throwers down there as well, a dangerous unit to keep an eye on for the defenders. Yeah, I think here the Uruk-hai pikemen have definitely had the kind of impact that Isengard wanted them to have. Damage has been done to the attackers, but is it going to be enough from the defenders' perspective? Kindred of Celeborn actually reposition themselves over to here, perhaps to try and finish off some high priority targets like the Trolls here, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that because they're pretty much standing all on their lonesome. Trolls and Uruk-hai all about them. Uruk-hai Berserkers, Chaldea Falls, run through by a Nazkai. Again, getting stabbed with a sword like that cannot be a particularly pleasant experience, you would imagine. Crossbows doing their thing, finishing off the final Rohirrim rider there. So they won't be sallying forth at the end in heroic fashion like we saw in the movies. So where was Haldir fighting? He was fighting at the base of the wall here, so yeah, this is where he perished. Nazkai there, Watchers of the Golden Wood actually shaken. And that is a rare enough sight. Forward come the Uruk-hai Berserkers. Some Dunland pikemen back here as well. Snaga skirmishers in a good position, but so too are the Cairn Amroth Rangers, trying to go after the Berserkers and the Nazkai in one fell swoop, so quantity of kills maybe not, but quality of kills there will be fairly high. Nazkai, Blackbolt, an utterly overwhelming force here for the Shieldmanes and the Riddermark Axemen to have to try and deal with. So really again, seeing examples of sort of mini last stands for the defenders throughout the battlefield, and that, generally speaking, points towards it being a bad thing for the defenders, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. More javelin fire. Medicel guards still utilising their javelins on high tier units as well, which is exactly what you want to be seeing, and of course they can be a very effective infantry unit potentially in the late game as well. Well, Shieldmanes are still contesting the wall over here, Rohan, as well. The Helmingas pumping as much arrows into the Nazkai as they are able to, and also Medicel Guard up here engaging them in melee. The Nazkai would still win that fight, but especially with the numbers being what they are, but they'll be able to hold long enough for the Helmingas to maybe have an impact on it. Plenty more of these gunman pikes. Uruk-hai crossbows are in a good position as well, and this is probably why the Medicel Guard are dying off so quickly. That was actually a blank shot. How disappointing. Spears of Orthanc there. The interior of this little area now. Medicel Guard just outside that gap there. Westmark Marshals and Helmingas continuing to fight, but it's been a pretty slow and gruesome push that the attackers have been mounting for the last little while in this battle. They've been taking damage all the way, but still. Down here, Uruk-hai Berserkers, looks like the final victory has happened over here. We missed the final stand of the Kindred of Celeborn in full, but this of course frees up any surviving Isengard and Dunland units that were over here to attack the main fortress as well. There's no longer a route that goes this way, so they will have to go through the main entrance. Spears of Orthanc offering a little bit of support. Still some Rohirric units putting up a fight in the outer section of the keep. Here in this inner section though, Isengard continue to move forwards. Still those Helmingas firing in, and I assume they're going to be trying to target down the pikes where they can. But the Uruk-hai infantry, especially the guards of Orthanc, will be fairly resilient to arrow fire from the front. Heavy armour and shields coming into effect. Medicel Guard retreating. So it will be kind of fascinating to see how Rohan decide to try and tackle this situation from here. The Helmingas, and they have a fairly perfect shot after all. Let's see what's going on in here. So they do have some Westmark Marshals and Westmark Spearmen guarding this little route. And they're going to be moving in here as well. Karas Galadon's Guardians are still alive. I mean, that could be a really difficult unit to face in an environment like that if the attackers don't have anything that they can use to counteract that. Medicel Guard, are they firing down here? Possibly. More Uruk-hai pikemen moving forward. They've already shown themselves to be very effective in this battle so far. So Guard, only a few of them are throwing their javelins, perhaps because of positioning more than anything else. Cairn Amroth Rangers retreating. Shield Maidens fighting the good fight up on the walls. What very little remains of the Westmark units down here being overrun now by Uruk-hai. And the Shield Maidens of Rohan going to finish off those sniper. In fact, that was a Isengard general in there as well that they've managed to kill off. It's a good little catch. Isengard maybe a little bit more disciplined than their Orcish brethren, but still very much susceptible to morale shocks, as are Dunland. Shield Maid's in a good position, the Helmengas continue to be in a good position, so with more pikes moving forward this time from Dunland. Still trying to anchor that line in place, but they're going to be taking an awful lot of damage as they do so. More Shield Maidens in place as well, so this is a huge amount of throwing axes that Isengard are going to be eating here. And with their options somewhat limited, they have 2 gates that they can try and attack. This is the main one, and they're being made to pay for this fairly severely. It's exactly the sort of thing the defenders needed to see, to be honest. More retreating. Stagger skirmishers moving along. I mean, they will be able to start coming along this way and attacking from the other side at some point, but not just yet. You can see the Isengard are starting to stack up over here as they push the ram forward to start smashing that gatehouse down. And then Gus now getting into melee. As I said, decent medium line infantry, but in this sort of situation you might need something a little bit more impressive in melee, but it's better than nothing. It's the Westmark Marshals that, at least in melee terms, are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, as long as they can avoid getting held at bay by the pikes. Stuff like the Uruk-hai infantry and the Guards of Orthanc will not enjoy being in melee with these Rohirrim axemen. More reinforcements, Trollshaw axe throwers, so it's become a real meat grinder, this fight here. Isengard's still trying to get their crossbows in place to support, as well they should, because if they are able to do so even partially, it's the sort of thing which can make a pretty extreme difference on the fight, and of course they can also target down a unit like the Medicel Guard, which an important thing to try and get rid of, an important thing for the defenders to try and save as well, to be honest with you. If Eclipse notices that this is occurring, he needs to move those post-haste. Helmengas continuing to fire. Trollshaw axe throwers going onto the front line. I mean, for numbers purposes it's fine, but
The enemy are battering down our gates.
they are very, very fragile. The gates getting battered down. Uruk-hai crossbows across here. Trying to get in position to... What are they firing at here, the Medicel Guard? Whatever it is, I don't think it's worth it, because they're continuing to take hits from the crossbows, so I do maintain the fact that they probably need to leave this area. Nazgûl there, javelin fire.
The enemy's ram has breached the gates.
There goes the ram. And how much are they actually... if they still have only those 2 units, yeah, the Westmark Spearmen moving back a little bit. They are still in shield wall formation though, so they're moving pretty slowly. If Isengard want to, they could try and catch up to them and force Rohan into a fight they don't really want to have. He's a very narrow choke point zone. The Helm's Hammer is ready to reinforce should the defenders wish it. And so far, still, the defenders inflicting huge, huge losses on the attackers. More throwing axes. Helmengas waiting in place. Another attacking general falls. And these are the sorts of things which may prove to be important as the game goes along. Helmengas will struggle though with trolls in and amongst them. They don't have the same damage as the Westmark Marshals they're fighting alongside, necessary to bring the trolls down quickly. One does fall, but there you go. And Medicel Guard may be being committed to melee, fairly bloodied as a result of loitering in full view of the crossbowman for maybe a little bit longer than was necessary. Shieldmanes of Rohan also getting into melee, so reinforcements here, but you can see that Isengard continuously able to commit reinforcements to the front line, and that has been a pretty continuous problem for the defenders. Isengard looked to have been taking an awful lot of damage and maybe flagging a little bit, but then they can just send forward another group of units. Everything at this point is within the fortress though, there's nothing left outside at this stage, except for one unit of veterans that returned from routing. So they may come back. It's 19 Shieldmanes of Rohan preventing these reinforcements from moving forwards, but there's an inevitability about this at this point. The Rohan units that are fighting in the inner keep will have to split their attention, and with that, of course, that's where Isengard will really start to grow in confidence in this fight. Meanwhile, in here, Westmark's Spearmen are in position as the Uruk-hai pikemen and their accompanying Blackwolds do move forward. Plenty of Uruk-hai pikemen as well. No skirmishers for Rohan to deal with that lot either. We'd have to try and push forward, I guess, with the Westmark Spearmen. Downhill. I don't fancy this for Rohan if they don't have any skirmishers that they can use to help bring the pikeman numbers down a little bit. If they can do that and buckle their formation, of course, the Westmark Marshals will be ideal for dealing with them very quickly, but if not, I do worry about them a bit. Helm's Hammer's waiting. Still plenty of elite units. Again, those Karas Galadon's Guardians could be so important. Especially seeing as Isengard have had to use their pikes to a fairly decent extent. Helmingas getting into melee now with the Lurtz hunting pack. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. Nazkai marching in single file into the fray as well. 20 Westmark Marshals here, but that's not going to be enough to save the Helmingas. They're up against two of the stronger Isengard units. One player admits defeat, so none of the defenders will have done that. It will have been an attacking force. I'm going to look at this fight over here as well. They actually do need to hurry up a little bit with this flanking move, I think, Isengard, because Rohan continue to be fairly dominant in this fight over here. The application of those Shieldmanes, especially the Medicel Guard, has led to them continuing to do an awful lot of damage against the Isengard forces that are here. The fact that their pikes has probably saved Isengard more manpower than otherwise would have been. The Shieldmanes having to turn around now though as well. I don't know, I mean, the Shieldmanes aren't going to be enough to turn this fight around either, nor the 20 Westmark Marshals that have already seen combat. Those Nazkai are going to be far too strong in this situation, but more out of necessity, I think, than anything else. And there is, of course, those crossbows, which are continuing to be the ever-present problem that the defenders have to try and solve. And I'm not sure they've come up with an adequate answer as of right now. Either way, they still have their last stand, potentially. They have managed to push downhill, and I guess through sheer weight of numbers, there wasn't enough pikemen. Uruk-hai crossbows moving in. If they still have a bit of ammunition and they position themselves just so, they could be very useful, but so far this attack through the secondary gate that leads into the interior of Helm's Deep hasn't actually gone all that well. Using the spears first as a battering ram and the axes as a damage dealing mechanism has worked for Rohan here. And they do still have ammunition, and that is a real problem. As depleted as that crossbow unit is, they will be able to shoot into those Rohirric units unimpeded for the time being. Yeah, and they have managed to move in now, so they are going to try and retreat into the town centre, which might be ×2 speed time if we're getting into that. The last battle on Kameth Bryn, they had to make very liberal use of ×2 speed because of a single choke point being the only thing going on in the battle. We may be starting to see the beginnings of that now as well. What remains of these Helmingas are actually just purely routing as a result of the flanking force finally coming good. Still those Shieldmanes of Rohan. That hunting pack victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Is that correct? These shield maidens still have a bit of ammunition being left behind as well. Maybe a little bit slow on the uptake there. I don't know how easy to use in the interior of Helm's Deep throwing axes would be, but still, if the option was there, maybe they should have been saved rather than effectively thrown under the bus. Victory seems certain for the shield maidens. Now that would be a very big surprise. More units moving forward here now as our Spears of Orthanc, so yeah, more crossbows. You can see that Rohan actually pushing further forwards to avoid the angle that the crossbows had on them originally, and that has yielded results because it means they have managed to smash the pikemen and black bolts that still remained over here. And the Westmark Marshal is actually going to try and avoid this fact, maybe retreat. Here, still seeing sort of the slow but somewhat inevitable push that Isengard seems to have been enacting in this battle as a whole. The damage they've taken has been fairly extreme, but I mean, just taking a census of what Isengard still have left, crossbows, skirmishers. I mean, one problem they may have, if they are reliant on stuff like skirmishers and crossbows, the interior of Helm's Deep is not the place, really, for that kind of warfare. They need some units of genuine quality in melee, otherwise they are going to struggle against Karis Galadon's Guardians and Helm's Hammers especially with that damage to the armoured units they still have remaining. Could prove to be a little bit too much for the attackers to deal with. And having a look, they are... like Snaga Skirmishers and Uruk-hai crossbows are making up too great a proportion of their army for me to feel comfortable with them. The Shield Maidens are doing a remarkably good job, actually, of holding back the Isengard horde, which does surprise me. Surely they're shaken. So too are the Snaga Skirmishers, then, routing 130 men, even though they may be Snaga, will be a pretty big victory. And over here, I believe they must have retreated. Yeah, they did. A little bit depleted from their heroics there, but definitely a worthwhile endeavour that from Rohan, doing yet more damage to Isengard on the approach. Uruk-hai crossbows in position maybe to try and bank their shots, as are the Spears of Orthanc. It's all well and good being in formation like that, as the Westmark Spearmen are, but that's not going to help them too much against crossbows. Still units alive? Still two Shield Maidens? Ironically enough, though, it's not actually two Shield Maidens, it's the Banner Carrier, who is a man, and the Officer, who is also a man. So all of the actual maidens in the unit have perished. But still, put up a decent fight there, showing their defensive prowess a little bit, perhaps. Of course, the gates still haven't been battered down, so they will need a piece of siege equipment in order to get through there, which Hunter or Hunted is going to be doing so with his Uruk-hai crossbowmen as we speak. Meanwhile, this is a fairly bold counter-attack because they could have just retreated around the side of the walls, but they moved forward instead. I don't know, yeah, and they're not going to have the weight of numbers to achieve what they did before, so I actually think this time it's a little bit of a mistake because they've already taken too many losses to be able to pull off the same trick again. Uruk-hai pikemen. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Very surprising. Uruk-hai crossbows routing. Yeah, now they're retreating. I thought so. Especially with a unit like Spears of Orthanc. Yeah, that sort of quality spike is going to be too much. You need to make sure that these crossbows that are in this little alcove in the Fortress of Helm's Deep, that they can't be used to good effect on your units that are further inside, much the same way as these Snaga Skirmishers, because I think actually in terms of sheer quality of infantry units, the defenders do have the edge now. They just can't afford to allow the attackers to turn this into a game of cat and mouse with javelins and crossbows. And I think this is going to be a case of ×2 speed, honestly. Frame rate struggling a little bit here because of all of the dead bodies that litter the courtyard. I suppose you call this. They're waiting for their opportunity to move forward when the main gatehouse has been battered down, and it's going to be a final 10k frames, near enough, of trying to take the main hall inside of Helm's Deep. Having a look at the percentage of kills, I mean, the defenders losing by 2%, but again they've got that quality. Is that quality going to be enough though? And it's not as if Isengard are bereft of it either. Some Spears of Orthanc, some Narskai, some Lurt's hunting pack, a few pikes still alive, so I don't know. I think it really does depend on if Isengard can use any crossbow bolts or javelins to good effect. If they can, then the attackers should probably be able to win this. If they can't, then I'm not sure personally. And positioning is all the defenders need to get right in order to make that very, very difficult, because they're going to need to move in here at some point, the attackers. And if they send their infantry alone without that support, I have a feeling they're going to get crushed.
The enemy's ram has breached the gates.
And the Snarg are already very eager to get going. Are they going to try and use their javelins right away? Yeah, you can see here Uruk-hai crossbowmen able to get actually a pretty decent little angle on the Karas Galadon's Guardians. That is not what you need to be seeing. Victory seems certain for them already, as some dregs basically of the Rohan army have been sent forward first and foremost. Lango needs to move his Karas Galadon's Guardians. If he ends up losing them too much like this because of dithering, then that would be a true disaster. And he does move them, that's good. And if they move all of these units forward to defend the gatehouse, keep these units back over here to intercept any units that may come around this corner, this is where the quality should start to pay. Medicel Guard and Karas Galadon's Guardians holding the main gate. Medicel Guard actually holding themselves back just a little bit for the time being. Both units of Helm, actually there's 3 units of Helm's Hammers, well I guess they're defenders so they can go into the red limit on very high tier units if they so choose. Karas Galadon's Guardians moving back a little bit, maybe trying to give the attackers the impetus to move in, and then they can maybe try and surround them. Karas Galadon's Guardians from the front and crushing in from the sides with 2 units of Helm's Hammers. It's the sort of thing which would be very difficult to recover from for Isengard as they move forward. Medicel Guard reforming themselves just a bit. Need to be careful not to give Isengard so much room that they can use their crossbows, though. Snarga Skirmish is trying to get into place. Again, using these very depleted units to chase down the Snarga is a fairly good ploy, especially seeing as, I mean, they have no ranged units left really, the defenders at this point, but given how constricting the interior of Helm's Deep is, you don't necessarily need them. And I feel as though the attackers may need them, because in come the Helm's Hammers now. Pikes will also roll forward. They're going to get squashed in between all of these very high tier units here at Isengard. Helm's Hammers just rolling forwards. And that armour piercing is going to be so effective against what remains of Isengard. Maybe the Lurt's hunting pack are a little bit less focused on their armour, but you can see them there. I don't know if the Helm's Hammers count as Great Shielding. I don't know if they have the same ability to push through stuff like the Blackwood Legion. You'd think so based on the size of their shield, but I think that's not actually true. I don't think they have the increased mass, but yeah, those Isengard units are taking a lot of damage. Still, the Spears of Orthanc trying to do their thing, getting some hits on the Rohan units that are there. But this is a little bit too slow at this point, I think. That damage that was just done. Units that are routing could also prove to be a real problem as the Helm's Hammers from Sin once again start bulldozing their way forward. Any weakness will be exploited as once again the Rohirrim just shunt Isengard out of the way. And there we have it. Defeat seems certain for the Nazkai even. You know things are looking a little bit grim for you if that is the case. Again, some of these more depleted units are being sent forward first and foremost to make life just a little bit more dangerous for the Spears of Orthanc, but these units are going to take some point-blank shots as the pikes are doing kind of enough to give the Spears of Orthanc their cover. I mean, the good thing about the Spears of Orthanc is, of course, they can look after themselves perfectly fine in melee. Point-blank shots having the desired effect. Further away, there's some Snaga skirmishers waiting. More hits. There is the general as well for Dunland. I mean, I don't know if Dunland have actually got anything left other than this unit of Spears of Orthanc, and they're not going to rout at the loss of a general, so it's not that important. Helm's Hammers moving forward, maybe trying to push through the formation of the pikes here as... I mean, the defenders there are getting very gung-ho. They need to be a little bit careful because Uruk-hai crossbows are there. I mean, Helm's Hammers... This is kind of the counter-attack outside the fortress with the cavalry, only it's infantry this time around. That, I believe, was the Dunland general, based on the position of that. I mean, these Uruk-hai crossbows and Snaga skirmishers trying to use their missiles, but to limited effectiveness, and I don't know, this could be something they cannot recover from. These Snaga are gonna rout, yeah, very easily. Uruk-hai crossbows, this brute force approach with the Helm's Hammers really doing the business. What little remains of the Nazkai being dealt with by the healthier unit of Westmark Marshals, and there's also what remains of the Karas Galadon's Guardians. There's 71 of them still remaining as well, which is a problem. Hemorrhaging their manpower a little bit here at this point. And the Helm's Hammers, as much as I said the Spears of Orthanc can look after themselves in melee, one thing that is going to be effective against them is very high tier armour piercing, and that's exactly what the Helm's Hammers will provide. The pikes is another unit of Nazkai over here, 62 of them as well, so that actually should be enough to turn this fight around a little bit with the Karas Galadon's Guardians over here though. I mean, this is a fairly even fight the more I look at it, this one in particular, but with Rohan winning the fight so handily on the other side, I don't know. Those crossbows need to start firing, those Snaga need to start doing the business. Bit of a surrounding action could start springing from all of this, and I think that's exactly what Rohan intend on doing. They're going to go around this way and surround the enemy as the Snaga, battered and broken, running for the hills. 11 Nazkai. They need to not just leave these Nazkai alive, and indeed Westmark Marshals continuing to do their thing. There's one Alert's hunting pack remaining. We could be seeing a fairly impressive defender victory taking shape here. Helm's Hammers will be able to come in from the rear and surround this position, and stopping these crossbows from firing is going to be very, very key. Spears of Orthanc is shaken actually, so maybe the loss of the general will have an impact. Defeat seems certain for the defenders up here now though, so that flanking force is going to need to hurry itself up a little bit. They do have a decent amount of time, I would say, because of the presence of the Lothlorien pikemen. But it's not an infinite amount of time. They are now running a little bit faster. What remains of the Nazkai now, only 4 of them. The damage of these Rohirric axes having the desired effect. And this unit could just be turned around and used to reinforce the front line a little bit more directly, I would suggest. But yeah, I think we are seeing a defender victory. It still says they're losing by percentages, but again, if you look far and wide, I don't know what this unit of Medicel Guard is doing, but they need to be committed faster than they're currently being. It would be a real shame to lose based upon such things. Helm's Hammers will of course demolish these Snaga. Those routing units don't count towards the percentages, is what I was trying to say, and that means we are probably looking at a very even split in terms of what there is, but that is going to tumble away pretty quickly in favour of the defenders if they can finish these units off. I mean, they've done an awful lot of damage just pushing through that unit of Snaga. As the Helm's Hammers are going to try and stop the crossbows from firing, the Snaga are firing away as well. They are doing damage here, the attackers. They've done the hard bit, the defenders. They should go on to win from here. And if they don't, it's because they've dithered for no reason at all at the end. Still Nazkai, we've seen impressive individual last stands in this battle already. And tying up this number of Westmark Marshals is another one of those from the one Nazkai. Yes, indeed. Isengard moving? Are they on the move? There's something going on. What are they doing? Oh, I see. They're going to go after the Dunland veterans that are out there. Feeling confident in the ability of their Helm's Hammers. There's 2 units of Helm's Hammers over here after all, so Uruk-hai crossbowmen now unable to offer their support to this main attack. Nazkai victory seems certain. The Helm's Hammers that were up here have certainly taken a fair amount of losses, but like I said, the Lothlorien pikes giving enough time to make sure that victory is assured. This unit of Dunlanding veterans, which of course returned from routing but were never recommitted to the fight. Not that a unit of 49 veterans would have had the difference-making effect that the attackers would have required. They still have ammunition, is that what's going on here? Or are they just lining up ready for that to be the final thing they do in the battle? Helm's Hammers actually taking a fair amount of damage there from the Snaga skirmishers. So I need to push through with maybe a little bit more haste. Also, the Snaga are so poor in melee that they don't have too much to be worried about. Finally, that general falls, and that frees up another unit of Westmark Marshals. The Javelin's actually putting up a pretty good show. But surely now, with all of the Helm's Hammers bearing down upon them, that will cease to be the case. Oh no, they did charge into one another. And of course, if all else fails, Rohan will still have these Medicel Guard that will be returning to the castle at some point. The veterans will fall away very, very quickly under the attentions of a unit as high quality as this. "46 of them will remain." I mean, they have actually, looks like the veterans have actually killed off 1 or 2. Which is more than I was expecting. I was expecting 0, but there you are. A bit further in. How are these Snaga getting on? Poorly. They're routing. And that means the Helm's Hammers are finally going to be able to surround this position over here. Karas Galadon's Guardians keeping the Isengard forces at arm's length, and of course with the surrounding movement and with the support now coming in from those Westmark Marshals that were victorious at the front gate. This will be the last stand of the attackers, so not much of the defenders left, but in the end Isengard not able to sustain those losses throughout the entirety of the battle in the way that we would have been hoping. If this had been a more open final stand, Isengard should still have gone on to win it because of the crossbows and javelins they still have. They weren't able to use it really in the confines of the fortress, and we actually see the benefits of WK's additions here for the defenders. The constricting interior of Helm's Deep made it so Isengard couldn't lay down their crossbow and javelin fire as they would have wanted. The defenders could dictate the shape of the engagement at the end, and that is ultimately what has resulted in their win. And there you have it. May as well go up to ×2 speed from here with the Helm's Hammers coming in from the rear. It's probably going to be the Nazkai, the ones that are last remaining on the field. Yeah, percentage of allies to enemies killed now, the defenders winning by 1 percentage point, and that's not something the attackers are going to be able to get back at this stage. So the Westmark Marshals try to get in here to get into closer effective range against the Uruk-hai pikemen. I mean, the elves are still here as well, albeit with probably their most impressive unit that was on the field in the Lothlorien pikes, but I think everyone has got at least one unit remaining. Eclipse has got his Westmark Marshals, Sin has got his Helm's Hammers, Lango has his Carascalon's Guardians, but that's about it. It will be about 100 remaining at the end, but the Battle of Helm's Deep will result in a defensive victory. We will smash the enemy. Seems a Urukai fight when you don't say, but yeah, this was a good one, and certainly some of the camera issues and some of the pathfinding and some of the just more unrefined elements of this map, as it were, before have definitely been played away now, and Helm's Deep has been brought up to date in the same way that Edoras was at the start of WK's map-making odyssey, and it's good to see. Westmark Marshals is also the Medicel Guard have returned now. Yeah, the men that still remain at the end of this battle will have certainly earned a rest. I'm very intrigued to see what did the damage for Rohan as well. We won't be able to see the Lothlorien kill counts. There goes the final general. Yes indeed. Well earned celebrations there, so again, decent spread of kills, the elves getting the most, but then again they were responsible for defending the lower section of the fortress first, and that is where an awful lot of the attackers' manpower was first committed. And of course the elves being the elves are always going to get very good kill to death ratios. Rohan also doing very well for themselves as well. Isengard and Dunland relatively similar-ish. I mean, the difference between the Dunland army at 800 and then Eothad's Isengard army is fairly substantial, but not to the point of it being irregular. And there you can see, you know, a decent spread of kills there. But let's see what did the damage for the Rohirrim armies. Both units of Medicel Guard getting identical kill counts, which is impressive, both with their javelins and in melee. Very, very useful. They must have underperformed in at least one of those areas, though, for those kill counts. I mean, to get full effectiveness with javelins and then in melee, I'd expect around 200. But still, when you've got two of them, it doesn't really matter so much. The Helm's Hammers, instrumental in Rohan's victory towards the end. It's probably the best performance we've seen from that unit. Being used as a bludgeon. Maybe they do have the same effect as the other Great Shield Infantry because of the way they were utilised, I'm not sure. Shield Maidens clearly used a very good effect as well. We saw time and time again the odd volley from Shield Maidens connecting with a very large blob of Isengard and Dunlanding forces. So there you go. Westmark Marshal 64 is a bit disappointing, but 174 is just fine. The Westmark Infantry and Westmark Spearmen, we saw them doing their job as well. Nothing too fancy, but good kill counts. And like I said, doing their job. Helmingast getting good kill counts. Riddermark Axemen actually doing well for themselves as well, considering how relatively fragile they can be. Eastmark Spearmen. The Sons of Yule maybe a little bit more of a disappointment, but the rest of the army certainly more than made up for that. And Eclipse's army, I'd imagine something similar. Helm's Hammers. His were used maybe in a little bit more of a traditional fashion as more of a defensive bulwark. They did that job just fine, but again, they were also thrown in against those Nazkai in the position of the battlefield we're looking at right now, and that didn't help them. Medicel Guard, plenty of good kills on the Shield Maidens. The Helmingast also doing very well, so the ranged units, both archers and throwing projectiles from Rohan, clearly doing very nicely. Westmark Marshals also doing nicely in that courtyard fight. Westmark Spears, Westmarks in general doing okay. The Catapult actually a bit of a letdown as well. So under normal circumstances, if the defenders had their budget spent on a unit of Sons of Yule and a Catapult and they ended up being relatively disappointing, very disappointing in the case of the Catapult, especially in comparison to in the last battle when we saw Cardland's Catapult wreaking havoc, I would usually say the defenders have almost certainly got no chance, but on this occasion they're ranged units and we can't see the elven kill counts, but we can sort of envisage what they would probably be. They were so effective that they were able to make up for that. So it does go to show that as the defenders you do have a little bit of leeway, a little bit of margin for error. You don't have to play a perfect game with a perfect composition in a 5v3 in order to be victorious. But again, I think the fortress itself also being very defensible certainly helped the defenders as well. But a well-deserved victory in the end, I think, because it was the right mix of using your resources correctly and also a nice bit of aggression and map control at the end, which the attackers weren't really in a position to really contest at that point because of the kind of units they had remaining. They couldn't really do anything about it, which is unfortunate for them. But fortunate for Rohan and Lothlorien. I'm sure most people are probably rooting for them to win this battle anyway, so probably good for me as well. But yeah, big thank you to Sin for sending this one in. A big thank you to WK for making the adjustments to Helm's Deep as well, which are so nice to see. And a big thank you to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay. As I mentioned, I'm not going to spend too long on it, but in the upcoming weeks we will be seeing a return of the knockout tourney stuff, because I will not be on call anymore, and I will be able to sort of devote a little bit more midweek time to prepping for the weekend when I can actually record one of those in one go. Also, the live stream channel update, like I mentioned, probably going to be later on in the summer at this point, when I have a bit more of a clear idea of what's actually going to be going on, because at the moment things are a little bit all over the place, but we'll have to wait and see on what happens there. Hopefully by then I'll have a little bit more of a clear indication of what's actually going to be happening. Other than that though, same schedule is going to still be applying. Reforged, Silmarillion battle replays, at least 2 videos a week. And that's probably going to be the case up until the end of the year, when maybe things will change, or maybe they'll be a little bit longer where that has to continue to be the case. We'll wait and see. It's very up and down at the moment. But irregardless of that, big thanks to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.